It was simply because someone reported that a robot killed a pet dog. The man immediately picked up a knife and stabbed his own hand. Then the man told the other party,
"He's the only one in this kitchen who couldn't harm a living being."
But can robots really not harm living beings? With the rapid advancement of technology, robots serving society has become the norm. People dare to use robots with confidence, because the development companies have set robot laws that must be followed. When manufacturing robots, the first law is that robots must not harm humans. The second law is that robots can't undergo unauthorized modifications. With these laws in place, people feel very secure having robots around. But humans occasionally ponder, now that every household has a robot, whether they will truly never awaken self-awareness. If they do awaken, will they harm humans? These questions remain unanswered. One day, a drunk police officer passed by a junkyard. He suddenly noticed a light shining under a tarp. The officer hurried over and lifted the tarp. He discovered a robot inside that was modifying itself. The officer instantly sobered up at the sight. This robot had violated the second law. The officer prepared to shoot it on the spot, but unexpectedly, the robot raised its hand in surrender. The officer pulled the trigger directly, because robots don't fear death. However, this robot was clearly different. Everything seemed to indicate that something was about to happen. Soon after, the company sent Jack to investigate the matter, to see what was wrong with this robot. Jack soon met the robot that had been brought back for inspection. At this time, a technician informed him that after inspection, the robot had many extra parts added to it, and these parts would help the robot upgrade. This was quite a peculiar matter. It was said that these parts were installed by the robot itself, but Jack disagreed with this claim. He believed someone had modified the robot. This matter must be resolved quickly, otherwise the company's reputation and public image would suffer. Immediately after, Jack checked the robot's code and found relevant information. It turned out to be a brick-moving robot in the construction field. Jack quickly went to the construction site to look for clues. He saw many brick-moving robots here. They appeared to be completely normal. At this moment, a reflective cabinet caught Jack's attention. He looked through the cabinet and saw a robot behaving strangely. Jack hurriedly chased after it. The robot glanced at him and then left, but that glance sent a shiver down Jack's spine. As the robot walked away, Jack quickly followed it. He wanted to see what it was planning. Soon, Jack discovered the robot in a container. Parts were scattered all around it. The robot was squatting next to it holding a box. Jack asked it what was inside the box. Jack was very confused at this sight. He didn't do anything. How did it spontaneously combust? Then Jack took the robot back to the company. Listening to his description of the scene, his friends couldn't believe that a robot could self-ignite. He then opened the box that the robot was holding. After rummaging through it, he found a nuclear battery inside. This thing has a lot of energy and is very rare. Generally, robots can't withstand this kind of energy. Once installed, they would be incinerated to ashes. So what was this self-igniting robot doing guarding the nuclear battery? To get to the bottom of everything, the technicians forcibly restarted the robot. Jack quickly picked up the nuclear battery and asked it what this thing was for. The robot said nothing in response to this question. It then activated its self-destruction program.
Shit, Vulcan.
This was truly bizarre. Jack looked at the robot before him, which seemed to have a life of its own, and felt like it had developed self-awareness. In order to uncover the truth, Jack went to the junkyard where the police had discovered the robot. After careful observation, he found a particularly odd wall brick. When Jack opened it, he was shocked to find another nuclear battery inside. It seemed that these robots were plotting some kind of conspiracy. The next day, he and a few police officers went to the black market to gather intelligence. The streets were filled with scrap robots. The robots here were sold by the parts. Jack believed that someone was buying the parts for illegal modifications. After some inquiries, they arrived at a nightclub. It was said that the robots here had been reconfigured. Under the guidance of the club owner, they met the robot named Helen. She had a beautiful appearance and special settings. Helen even actively catered to guests upon meeting them. When Jack asked her if she could inflict pain on humans, Helen surprisingly replied that she could satisfy any request. It was clear that Helen had not adhered to the first law, because robots must not harm humans at any time. It has now been confirmed that Helen had been illegally modified. This is something that is strictly prohibited by law. Jack then asked the owner who modified Helen, but the owner refused to disclose any information. The police officer nearby didn't want to waste time with her. He directly shot and damaged Helen's leg. Jack thought the officer's actions were a bit excessive. The officer stated that they didn't know when she would confess, but Helen definitely needed to be repaired. Sure enough, in the early morning, the owner rode her bike, not knowing where she was headed. Jack hurriedly followed her. She soon entered an abandoned warehouse. Jack also decided to go in and investigate. Unexpectedly, as soon as he entered, he saw a woman pointing a gun at him. It turned out that the woman was the engineer who modified the robots. After Jack explained his purpose, the woman seemed interested in what he had to say. Jack then presented the chip from the self-igniting robot to her. He expressed his hope that she could help him, as long as they could figure out why the robot had developed self-awareness. He offered to give her a nuclear battery after the job was done. Thus, the two reached a collaboration. That night, the woman sent a fax, but it only contained the words "very interesting." Jack was very confused, so he drove to find the woman and inquire about the situation. At this time, the woman invited him to see something interesting.
Looking at her hands. Then she crawled all the way here.
Jack was completely stunned at this sight. The woman stated that she had repaired the damaged chip. Then she installed it onto Helen. Immediately after, Helen gained self-awareness. It only took a few minutes to master the transformation technology, while she had been studying for several years at that time. Just as the woman finished speaking, someone knocked on the door. She went to open the door and was shot dead instantly. The assassin then aimed to eliminate Jack. Jack, frightened, hurried to escape. It seemed that his investigation into these matters had touched on some people's interests. In desperation, he jumped into a car that was driving by, but when he turned his head, he was even more confused. The one coming to save him was actually Helen. Jack hadn't even had the chance to ask what was going on, when the assassin chased after them from behind. On the other hand, Helen was calmly driving the car, but Helen's driving skills were newly acquired. She didn't brake in time when she saw a roadblock, and the car flipped over, crashing into the assassin's vehicle. A violent explosion ended the chase. Uncertain how much time had passed, Jack finally regained consciousness. He opened his eyes to see Robot Helen. At this moment, he felt as if he were moving. As Jack tried to get up to check the situation, he stumbled and fell to the ground. He was very confused by the scene before him. Jack didn't know where he had been carried by 4 robots. He looked around and discovered that he was in a desert. Jack shouted for the robots to take him back, but the robots didn't move at all. With no other options, he had to walk back by himself. Jack stumbled after just a few steps. Fortunately, the robots saved him and gave him 2 drops of water. At this moment, Jack completely broke down. He had no idea how to leave this place. The next day, a few robots continued to lead Jack forward. They even prepared a delicious protein breakfast for him. Jack looked at the insects before him, feeling very helpless. He declared that he wouldn't eat them even if he starved to death. Then, while the robots were collecting drinking water for him, Jack took the opportunity to hide the signal gun in his bag. He then used his communicator to send a location to the police. Soon, the police received the location and drove there. He followed the tracks on the ground to find Jack. Just when Jack thought he was saved, the officer directly slapped him. He thought Jack was already in cahoots with the robots. At this point, Jack truly couldn't prove his innocence. At this moment, the officer prepared to shoot Jack. The robots surprisingly shielded him. Finally, Jack couldn't take it anymore. He pulled out the signal gun and shot the officer in the chest. Jack intended to scare him, but ended up killing him instead. The fat officer saw this and ran away in fear. Thus, Jack's only way home was gone. He went to the robots and asked them to take him back, but they completely ignored him. Instead, they were disassembling useful parts from their companions. Jack became even more distraught. He kept shouting, venting his emotions.
You have to obey me!
But when he turned around, he realized the robots had ignored him and left. Jack was afraid to be left alone here, so he hurried to keep up with the robots. Jack looked back at the body of the officer on the ground. He searched the officer's body for anything useful, just like the robots had done earlier. To his surprise, he found a piece of chocolate. After days without food, he finally tasted something delicious. Jack even shed tears. At night, Jack spoke to the robots about his struggles. He mentioned that his wife was about to give birth, but he couldn't be by his wife's side. Helen comforted him that they would arrive at their destination tomorrow. He could drive away in a car from there. The next day, Jack saw a stronghold under the guidance of the robot. He quickly raised his binoculars to observe. After Jack spotted vehicles at the stronghold, he excitedly walked over. After enduring countless hardships along the way, Jack finally met the boss behind the modified robots. But when he pulled off the man's cloak, Jack saw a mocking scene. He couldn't believe that this old-fashioned robot before him was the mastermind behind the robots gaining self-awareness. He then entered the stronghold, trying to find the real mastermind, but there was no one inside, only a pile of parts placed on the table. Originally, the parts collected by these robots had all been sent here. Meanwhile, Jack's company boss privately met with a shareholder. He actually knew long ago that robots would one day develop self-awareness, because the first-generation robots had no laws set for them. The robots at that time learned very quickly and could achieve self-evolution. Initially, humans could still communicate with the robots, but after a week, the evolution of the robots far exceeded human comprehension. They realized that the robot couldn't continue like this, and must be controlled within the existing cognitive range of humans. So humans issued commands to the robot, which was to find a way to solve the problem. Then it created 2 robot laws. Nowadays, robots have regained self-awareness. To protect the company's interests, they must secretly eliminate everyone who knows about it. Meanwhile, Jack looked at everything before him, and finally accepted the truth. The evolution of robots had surpassed humanity. At this moment, he just wanted to go outside for some fresh air, while several robots quickly assembled parts at the table. Just as they were about to finish, they stopped in place, because they were now missing just one thing, and that was the nuclear battery in Jack's hand. At this moment, Jack stared blankly into the distance. Suddenly, the first-generation robot came to his side. Jack told the robot that he was about to die here.
Jack, dying is a part of the human natural cycle.
Then, Jack asked if he was the first robot with self-awareness. The robot understood Jack's concerns, because the robots evolved too quickly. Humans feared being replaced by robots, but no one can dominate the world forever. They were created by humans. Perhaps one day in the future, after humans are gone, they would be the continuation of humanity. Then the robot revealed their plan. There was a deep canyon ahead. Humans detected that the radiation inside wouldn't dissipate for hundreds of years, but the robots were unaffected by radiation, so they decided to go there to extend their lives. Before that, they needed Jack's help. Jack instantly understood what the robots meant. He handed the nuclear battery in his arms to them. Soon, the robots installed the nuclear battery into a mechanical ladybug. This was a new life free from any laws, and it was their initial spark of life. The next day, the robots delivered the repaired car to Jack. Jack was very happy to finally be able to go home. When he said goodbye to the robots, he saw the mechanical ladybug come out. Jack asked Helen if it could talk. Helen replied that it couldn't speak, but it had a respiratory system. Looking at the adorable mechanical ladybug, Jack bid it farewell and set off on his journey home. If nothing unexpected happened, an accident was about to occur. Jack saw a person lying ahead. He quickly got out of the car to check the situation. Upon closer inspection, Jack realized that this person was his team leader, but he didn't know why he had been shot multiple times. Seeing Jack's arrival, the team leader questioned him about why he had betrayed humanity. After hearing Jack's explanation, the team leader revealed the company's secrets. Originally, the boss knew about the robots having self-awareness. In order to protect the company's interests, he planned to kill everyone who knew about it. Now he had come here with Jack's wife and child, with the aim of drawing Jack out. Once everyone had gathered, he would kill them along with those robots. Hearing that the boss had captured his wife and child, Jack quickly turned back to save them, but the boss had already brought people to the stronghold. At this moment, the robots were preparing to take the cable car to the canyon, and the boss's henchmen happened to discover it. Then the robots were shot several times. It glanced over at the opposite side. Perhaps it would gain freedom if it just jumped across, but reality ultimately defeated hope. Meanwhile, the boss's henchmen searched the area thoroughly, but there was no sign of Jack. They only found 2 robots. When one of the henchmen saw the first-generation robot, he threatened the robot with his gun, demanding it kneel and bow down. But the robot stated that they would no longer obey anyone's commands. The henchman said a piece of metal dared not to obey commands. The robot retorted that if he was metal, then he was just a gorilla. The henchman was infuriated upon hearing this. He then started shooting wildly. Seeing the robot being shot to near destruction, one henchman stepped forward to take its chip. After dealing with the trouble, they turned their attention to Helen. At this moment, a car was driving from a distance. Upon closer inspection, they found it was Jack returning to rescue his wife and child. The henchman quickly aimed at the car and fired, but the car's speed didn't decrease. Jack intended to crash into them directly. At his signal, his wife skillfully pulled out the knife from the bad guy and stabbed down. The henchman let go in pain. Fortunately, At the last moment, she successfully dodged. This crash directly killed 3 people. However, 2 others managed to avoid the impact. Jack aimed and shot at the fat henchman who was still alive, but he was also injured by another henchman. Soon, Jack was forced to the edge of a high platform. The henchman asked him why he wouldn't work for the company. Jack spat directly in response. He refused to work for greedy, corrupt people. The henchman thought there was no need for persuasion anymore. He was just about to shoot Jack. Suddenly, the mechanical ladybug rushed up and kicked the henchman off the platform. He never expected to die at the hands of a bug. At this moment, Jack pointed his gun at the mechanical ladybug. Because it was a machine free from any laws, no one knew if it would affect humanity in the future. Suddenly, Jack's baby let out a cry. Looking at this newly born life, Jack saw the continuation of human life. Perhaps the significance of the mechanical ladybug lies here as well. Then, Jack controlled the cable car to send Helen and the mechanical ladybug to the canyon. At this moment, Helen removed her mask, believing that there, she would grow her own kind, and how the future of humanity and robots will turn out is uncertain. We don't know. The film ends here. There has always been controversy over whether artificial intelligence will generate self-awareness. As technology continues to develop, no one dares to ensure that such a thing won't happen in the future. Humans prevent the birth of new life for the sake of profit. The robot's instinct is simply to extend new life. But the unknown is always a threat to humanity, so they don't care about the lives of other beings. In fact, the scariest thing is not that robots develop self-awareness, but that humans live programmed like machines. If you like my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Your support is the greatest encouragement for me.